Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SpaceWeek Live on this Sunday, March the 6th, 2022. So, looking at the events of the past week, let's get the bad out of the way first. Ukraine and Russia. Last week, there was some speculation that the world's heaviest airplane, the Antonov An-225 Maria, that was built to carry the Soviet Buran space shuttle, might not have been destroyed as reported. That maybe it was the unfinished second copy of the aircraft that was gone. Alas, the initial reports were true. Maria was housed at the Antonov International Airport, which is a small one-runway airfield in Hostomel, also called Gostomel, just a few miles west of the capital Kyiv. It was hit by something explosive and is now almost completely destroyed. Here's a video of a Russian reporter from Channel 1 reporting from the airfield as fighting continues nearby.
Съемочная группа сейчас работает на аэродроме Гостомель. Отсюда до Киева чуть больше 20 километров. Сейчас этот аэродром контролируется российскими воздушно-десантными войсками. Посмотрите, какая здесь сейчас обстановка. Перемещаться не очень безопасно, потому что на земле очень много неразорвавшихся боеприпасов. Украинские артиллеристы обстреливали аэродром. Вот, посмотрите, попали в ангар. Что от него осталось? Он сожженный за моей спиной.
Had a guest at the door. Here, let's go back to, there we go. All right. So the Russian state narrative, as relayed by this reporter and other Russian media, is that Maria was destroyed by Ukrainian artillery fire. The rest of the world, of course, maintains that it was destroyed by the Russians. I wonder if any military forensic experts out there have analyzed the available footage and photos of the scene and could provide some insight. Now, I'm familiar with satellite imagery from my time in the Air Force, but I couldn't tell you the difference between artillery damage, guided missile damage, or explosive charges. Either way, this unique and historic aircraft is no more. It should be noted that Putin just signed a law, and this is not strictly space-related, but nonetheless it's relevant. Putin just signed a law which punishes so-called fake news with up to 15 years in prison, a dramatic increase from the previous law that he signed in 2019, which saw prison times of approximately 15 days. Russian press or citizens that spread information discrediting the military, calling for sanctions against Russia, or criticizing the government are now putting themselves at significant risk. Without a free and open press, when the government controls the spread of information and news, the people are kept in the dark about the truth and reality. I read one Twitter comment from a Ukrainian who said that her own mother back in Russia didn't believe her when she said that her city was being shelled by Russian forces. Most people tend to believe what they're told, without much critical thinking or skepticism. Now, Russian forces also attacked the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, with 6 reactors. Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that if Russia didn't let them put out the fires, and during the live stream there did appear to be some fire trucks which showed up but then left a few minutes later without actually doing anything because the buildings were still under fire from Russian forces. If Russia didn't let them put out the fires, the meltdown could be 10 times worse than Chernobyl, which coincidentally is also in Ukraine. Fortunately, the fires were put out, and there was apparently no containment breach, although the site is under Russian control, or was, as of the last update I saw. Let's see. In response to sanctions against Russia, Roscosmos, by way of its politically vocal director Dmitry Rogozin, has further distanced itself from its international partners. They will no longer supply RD-180 or RD-181 engines to the U.S. I asked ULA's Tori Bruno how many RD-180s they had on hand for future Atlas V launches. He replied that they have enough for about 24 launches. I believe it was after the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014 that ULA made a concerted effort to stockpile as many RD-180s as possible in anticipation of a potential future political situation as we are currently seeing. So good foresight on that count. I did not get official numbers for the RD-181, which is used on Northrop Grumman's Antares rocket, but I was told informally that they only have 3 engines, which would be enough for 1.5 launches. On a positive note, that's not the positive note. Let's see here. Ah, yes. On a positive note, SpaceX shipped a load of Starlink dishes to Ukraine to restore internet to areas that have experienced service disruptions due to the war. However, users found that several Starlink terminals were being jammed for hours at a time. Elon Musk announced that SpaceX was temporarily shifting its focus to cyber defense and overcoming signal jamming, which may cause some slight delays with Starship and the new Starlink V2. Musk also advised Ukrainian Starlink users to only turn on the dishes for short periods of time and to conceal the dishes with light camouflage. In other Starlink news, Musk said that through a software update, they enabled mobile use of the dishes so they can be used on a truck or a ship while in motion. Or one might deduce at locations far from home. Unfortunately, I already canceled my Starlink service, so I can't test it myself. One day I'll probably sign back up for it, but for now, no Starlink for me. Let's see. Now here I'm going to have to kind of wing it. So, all right. Regarding the Russia no longer supplying us with engines, according to this quote from, I'm not sure what the source was, but it was posted on Reuters. Dmitry Rogozin is quoted as saying, "In a situation like this, we can't supply the United States with our world's best rocket engines. Let them fly on something else, like their broomsticks. I don't know what." So in response, of course, I had to make this. It's Elon Musk on his broomstick. but and that is actually that flame trail you see there is actually a Falcon 9's exhaust, but it's on a Nimbus 2000 broomstick. In any case, okay, reprioritizing cyber defense. And so in other Roscosmos news, Dmitry Rogozin directed his ground crew at Baikonur Cosmodrome, where the OneWeb Soyuz, or rather the Arianespace managed Soyuz containing 36 OneWeb satellites, was supposed to launch this week. He directed his ground crew to take American-produced 3M vinyl sticky labels and literally cover up the flags of most of the countries on the rocket. And that included the flags of the UK, the US, Japan, South Korea, and France. The only flag that was not covered up was India. And that corresponds with the UN vote to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Of all the flags on that rocket, all of them voted to condemn Russia, except for India, which abstained. But nonetheless, the launch was canceled, and the OneWeb project is kind of in limbo at this point, indefinitely, until they figure out what to do. They're probably going to need to find a new launch provider, because although OneWeb is currently majority owned by an Indian investor, the service itself, the company itself, is based in the UK and is about 20% owned by the UK government. And as such, it does not look like Russia will be launching any more OneWeb satellites. So all of the OneWeb satellites thus far, they have more than 400 in orbit out of a planned 650. I think they have about 450. All of them have been launched on Soyuz rockets from 3 different locations. Baikonur in Kazakhstan, which is of course a former Soviet state, and one of the other countries that abstained from the UN vote. Vostochny Cosmodrome in far eastern Russia, and the Guyana spaceport in French Guiana, which is managed by the European Space Agency, but nonetheless it is a Russian Soyuz rocket that launches from there. And so I do not know, I have no personal knowledge of whether Arianespace has the capability of launching Soyuzes, like if they even have any in stock, I don't know. But if they have the capability to launch Soyuz from French Guiana without the assistance of Roscosmos personnel, which were recalled from that location. That was another tweet of Dmitry Rogozin's, that he was pulling out his staff from the Guyana Space Center. So without Soyuz, if they want to retain European launch, if they want a European launch provider to continue being the launch service for OneWeb, then it would have to be on a Vega rocket, except the Vega upper stage uses a Ukrainian-produced Avum engine. So, or rather, the Ukrainian Avum upper stage uses the Avum upper stage uses a Ukrainian-produced engine. So it is unclear as to whether or not Vega will be able to launch either, because Ukraine obviously is in a bit of an existential crisis right now. There is, of course, the option of going with an American rocket, but the prime suspects would be an Atlas V, which uses Russian engines, and of which we are not getting any more. So my suspicion is that the Atlas V launches have been mapped out and are now no longer open to new customers because we're not getting any more engines for that rocket. The replacement for the Atlas V is the Vulcan rocket, which is not finished yet, and they still don't have their Blue Origin BE-4 engines for that rocket, which I haven't heard much about lately, but I'm sure that Blue Origin will come under, will get some increased attention now that the Russian engines are no longer forthcoming. Or, of course, the SpaceX Falcon 9, which is, of course, a competitor, a direct competitor of OneWeb with their Starlink constellation. But my suspicion is that SpaceX would welcome the business. After all, Starlink is currently a loss leader project for SpaceX. They spend a lot more money than they are currently making on Starlink. And customer launches, such as what they might do for OneWeb, are their bread and butter. That's how they make their money. So that would be my guess, is that they're going to end up going with SpaceX. An American-produced rocket with an American-produced engine, and no supply issues with persona non grata, as it were. So Roscosmos actually, as a follow-up to this, Roscosmos, even after covering up the flags of the other countries, Roscosmos actually removed the Soyuz from the pad. So the satellites were fueled, the rocket was fueled, the rocket was on the pad. They actually lowered the rocket and pulled it away from the pad. So it is unclear whether Roscosmos will be giving back the 36 OneWeb satellites to the OneWeb Corporation, or if they're just going to keep them and repurpose them for Russian use, because, you know, sort of as a slap in the face to the UK for imposing sanctions against Russia. Time will tell, as it always does. So we also had some launches last week, go figure. Last Monday, a Rocket Lab Electron rocket launched the Strix Beta satellite for the Owl's Night Continues mission. Let's check it out.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
And as always, no sheep were harmed in the launching of this rocket. Or cows. They seem to rotate the livestock there at that Mahia Peninsula launch site. Then on Tuesday, an Atlas V with those RD-180 engines from Russia launched the GOES-T weather satellite from Cape Canaveral. Let's check that out, and then I'll have another clip for you.
The final seconds now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff. Liftoff of NOAA's GOES-T, our newest weather sentinel in the sky to help keep us safe here on the ground.
Daryl, let's listen in as we listen to United Launch Alliance Rob.
Let's look good.
Who's the flight mission commentator.
View has gone to closed loop control.
So here's a gorgeous 4K clip from ULA's highlight video. Though I have to mute the sound because there's background music, which is probably copyrighted. The rocket noise is mostly hidden behind the music and voiceover anyway, so you're not missing much. But they got some great visuals on this one. Just imagine rocket sounds. And so just to clarify, this is the rocket that Tory Bruno said they had enough RD-180 engines for 24 more launches of, which is quite a few. Atlas V launches are not that terribly common. And so they should be good for a few years yet, hopefully until the Vulcan is finished. Now, back to the payload. Here's a view from my very own 24/7 Satellite Time Lapses music stream with Bennu in the corner from earlier today. So the GOES series of satellites are geostationary weather satellites that hover over a specific point over the equator. There are two of them in two main ones in operation. There's GOES East, which shows South America and North America, and there's GOES West, which shows much of the Pacific and North America. GOES T, which is the satellite that just launched, once it achieved geostationary orbit, it was renamed to GOES 18. And over the course of the next 11 months or so, it will be checked out and tested and validated. And once all of its systems are determined to be okay and functioning, it will replace the current GOES West satellite, which is this view we see here, as the new GOES West. So it starts out as a letter, GOES T, and it becomes a number when it gets to geostationary orbit, GOES 18, and then in about 11 months' time, it'll become the new GOES West. Now, as for what will happen with the old GOES West satellite, which is GOES 17, that is not entirely clear. I'm sure they know what's going to. I'm sure that NOAA knows what's going to happen to it, but I personally am not sure. Now, the former GOES East, which was GOES 13, once it was replaced by GOES 16, which is the current GOES East, which is where we get this view from, although it's a full globe view, not just the zoomed in on the United States. GOES 13 was repurposed. It was basically sold from NOAA to the U.S. Space Force, and they relocated it much farther east so that it now hovers over the Indian Ocean and provides visual, infrared, and other wavelength views of that part of the world for the U.S. military. But so these satellites, they aren't always just retired to a graveyard orbit once their primary service life is done. They actually get repurposed and reused by other entities, which is great because they're not dead yet. Just like GOES West, even though it was the most recently launched GOES satellite in the GOES R series. It has a technical glitch, which I discussed last week, a cooling issue, which prevents all of its bandwidths from being used all the time. And so that's why they're replacing it first, even though it's actually a slightly newer satellite than the current GOES East. And then the next GOES launch will be in 2024, and that'll be GOES U, which becomes GOES 19, which will become the new GOES East about a year from that time. All right, moving on. Oh, by the way, please visit my 24/7 Satellite Time Lapse stream. It really is quite beautiful, and the music is very good, and the chat is always engaging when people actually show up. So, because of the quirks of the YouTube algorithm, sometimes it gets kind of quiet in there, but it's always there for you. So then on, let's see, Thursday, a SpaceX Falcon 9 launched from Kennedy Space Center with the Starlink 4-9 mission. Let's check that out.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Now, the let's see. The the drone ship camera did cut out again for this launch. So we don't have a great view. We don't actually see the landing, but it did land successfully. And this is a noteworthy one because this was the 11th landing for this booster. I believe this was the 3rd booster that SpaceX has landed 11 times. So the number just keeps going up as they keep reusing booster. So and there it is on the drone ship. So the original plan was for 10 missions with, quote, minimal servicing. And that is to say the boosters were designed to be reused not just 10 times, but 10 times with minimal servicing. So moving forward, you know, the boosters are getting a little more beat up, a little more, you know, kinks to work out. They may require more intensive refurbishment after each mission because they're older. But 11 launches for one rocket booster is pretty dang cool. Oh, okay. Here's the long. Okay, this is out of order. I had a video of them taking the Soyuz down from the. Actually, this isn't them taking it down. This is them carting it away on the Soyuz train. Why you no play? So the pace is pretty slow, as with most things involving rockets except for launch. Ooh. So yeah, there they are putting the strong backs back up into position. But yes, this was the OneWeb Soyuz being taken away from the launch site. And finally, and so that was supposed to launch on Friday, but again, the OneWeb launches are suspended indefinitely until OneWeb either patches up until the UK patches up relations with Russia, which I don't see happening in the near future, or OneWeb finds a new launch provider. Cough, cough, SpaceX. And here we have on, yesterday, a Long March 2C launched from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center in southwest China with 7 satellites, 6 Yinhe 02 satellites for an experimental communications network called the Mini Spider constellation, and 1 remote sensing CubeSat called Xingyuan. So I was just informed that my link for the 24/7 time-lapse stream is incorrect. If somebody could post or if a moderator who's present could post okay, I think Chris V did, thank you, post the correct link. I need to update the Nightbot command with the updated link. So looking ahead to this week, it's a bit sparse, but we do have a couple events of note. Early tomorrow, Monday, March 7th, the moon will pass in front of Uranus sometime between 0504 and 0829 UTC, depending on your location. Let me switch to my preferred pronunciation of that planet's name. This occultation will only be visible from eastern Australia and New Zealand, though, because of the alignment of Uranus and the moon only touches a small amount of Earth's surface. Let's see. And unfortunately, the event will take place during late afternoon for Australians while the sun is still up, so you probably won't be able to see anything. Our friend Meg in New Zealand might have a better chance, as the time will be a couple hours later there and the sun will have gone down. She would need a telescope, though, because Uranus is only magnitude 5.8, barely visible to the naked eye, in good viewing conditions. I've never seen it, to my knowledge, so... but if you are in the zone there and it's sufficiently dark, you may be able to see the moon pass in front of Uranus. Then on Tuesday, and I'm just going to switch to full screen because I don't have my calendar up, but I will link the calendar in the chat. Then on Tuesday, March 8th at 9:06 a.m. Eastern Time, that's 14:06 UTC, is this week's only launch, a Falcon 9 with Starlink 4-10 from Cape Canaveral. Then next Sunday, March 13th at 2 a.m., clocks will spring ahead 1 hour, and daylight saving time will begin. Eastern Standard Time becomes Eastern Daylight Time, which is UTC or GMT minus 4 hours. So currently it's minus 5 hours. Next week it'll be minus 4 hours. And so you'll see the EDT on my streams and on my calendar as opposed to EST, which it is currently. All right. So that is it for next week. I would like to take a moment to thank our intrepid channel members, if I could type it correctly, for supporting the channel. It's always helpful, especially given the what's the word? Can't think of the word. The inconsistent and unreliable nature of the YouTube algorithm. You never know who's going to show up. You might have 50, you might have 500. So, but thank you again for your support. Let me see if you have any questions. Ah, yes, Chris V. Thank you so much. I wasn't looking forward to scrolling back through all that chat. Okay, Mark Desert. As far as I know, there was only one An-225 ever. Well, there was only one completed. There was a second An-225 which was under construction in 1989 when it was first built, but it was never finished. So it has sat basically in a hangar in Ukraine for 33 years almost, unfinished. Now, I'm not sure why. Well, I guess the why is that the very specialized mission of the An-225 was fulfilled by their one aircraft, and it would have been expensive to finish the second one, and the Soviet Buran space shuttle program was canceled, so the primary mission of the An-225 was no longer relevant, because the Buran was no more. And in fact, the second An-225, which was never finished, fared much better than the Buran shuttles themselves, which were left to rot in hangars in Kazakhstan, subject to the weather, and finally one of the hangars collapsed completely, crushing much of the Buran shuttle that was stored inside. But let's see. Real Sven animated. And by the way, Real Sven, it's very good to know that you're okay. Real Sven lived in, and I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong, but Dnipro in the east of Ukraine, and was able to get out safely to Moldova, a small country to the southwest of Ukraine. So it's very good to know that you and your family are safe there. And we can all hope and pray that this mess clears up as quickly as it can, so that you can hopefully get back home and rebuild or proceed in any case. So Real Sven Animated asks, wait a minute, Raw Space, you were in the Air Force? Yes. I was in the U.S. Air Force, of course, because that's where I live, for 4 years active and then 2.5 years in the Air Force Reserves, which is sort of a weekend warrior sort of thing. My primary career field was, while I was active duty, my career field was target intelligence. So I got to look at lots of maps and charts and satellite images, which, that was my job, and it was my passion. I loved that kind of thing, and I still do, as you can tell from the content on my channel. And then when I got out into the reserves, I transitioned into communications and computers, which was more along the lines of what I do in my career as an IT guy and software developer. Evgeny Myasnikov, I'm sorry. The A350 freighter and 777-8 freighter will have bigger range, I think, than the AN-225. So that would be the A350 would be an Airbus, and the 777 would be a Boeing aircraft, I believe. I'm not the most informed guy on different airframes, but in any case, they may well have bigger ranges, and in fact, I think that there is, let me see. So just like measuring ships, measuring planes, there's different ways you can measure it. So the AN-225 was the heaviest aircraft ever made, and it also had the widest wingspan. Now, I don't know if it actually had the largest physical volume of capacity or the heaviest capacity for lifting, but in any case, yeah, aircraft and ships and things like that are measured in different ways. So it was designed for a very specific purpose, and they found uses for it. Despite the Buran program having been shut down, it's been used for humanitarian deliveries and transporting very large spacecraft and jet engines, like Boeing jet engines, and other large tanks, other large payloads that nothing else can accommodate. But all right, Libelula Washington says, won't those sticky labels just burn off going into space? So on ascent, while a rocket is ascending to space, it experiences the greatest aerodynamic forces at what they call max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure. Those are not anywhere close to orbital reentry forces. So on ascent, a rocket travels pretty fast, but on reentry, craft are subject to much greater speeds. And like, for example, when a Falcon 9 first stage booster re-enters the atmosphere, it's going about 3,500 miles per hour, something like that. And you see how toasty charred those get. When an orbital capsule re-enters the atmosphere, it's re-entering at 17,000 miles per hour orbital speed. So a whole different order of magnitude of forces being applied to the vehicle. And so on ascent, no, I think those vinyl stickers will be just fine. Now, if it were to re-enter, yeah, they would burn up. But but on ascent, it'll be just fine. And plus, the Soyuz boosters are discarded anyway. They're not reused. So, all right. Mark Desire, what sort of reception will the next manned Soyuz to the ISS, MS-21, get, Raw Space? Okay, so you're kind of jumping the gun because MS-21 will launch next week, and I was going to discuss it in further detail in next week's SpaceWeek episode. But MS-21 is a coincidentally noteworthy crew launch, because MS-21 will actually have 3 Russian cosmonauts on board. It will be the first crew launch to the ISS with 3 cosmonauts and nobody from other countries. Now, the timing is purely coincidental because the crew was chosen in May of last year, well before the current conflict or the current active war in the Ukraine. So this is not a response to international sanctions or anything like that. This is just a coincidental, there just happened to be 3 Russians on board this time. But as far as the reception, I mean, you can fantasize about, like how many Russians will there be on the station versus Americans, and who would win in a 0G fight. But the fact is, spacefarers, cosmonauts, astronauts are very much non-political. They conduct their business as usual and have congenial relations amongst each other, which is what one would expect of level-headed professionals, as opposed to, whiny and petty politicians, as it were. But now, as far as crew returns, Mark Vande Hei is scheduled to return on Soyuz MS-19 on March 30th, and he will be landing, and that'll be on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft that will be landing in Kazakhstan, as always. But and that's scheduled for March 30th. Now, as for whether Roscosmos decides that Mark Vande Hei isn't allowed to return, I mean, I doubt that they would do that, but again, time will tell. Rogozin has been kind of crazy with some of his tweets and proclamations, so we'll see. And if Mark Vande Hei has to stay up there longer, then we'll figure it out. Like whether he has to come back on a Crew Dragon or what, we'll figure it out somehow. But my suspicion is that he will come back on schedule as planned. Let's see. Tig says it's all up to you, Raw Space, to fix all of this. Well, Sagan save us all, because I am not a sufficiently well-informed or competent decision maker to be responsible for all that mess. Microbyte. How much are used satellites going for these days? Referring to the GOES series. Quite a bit, I'd reckon. Especially from the military, because there's a bit of a premium there. As for specific numbers, no idea. 100 million, 50 million, I don't know. I don't know how much the GOES satellites cost. I mean, they are premium, like they are amongst the most technically advanced and fanciest satellites up there, so. All right. Raw Space Addict says, how is it that some geosync sat pics have some light during night passes, showing clouds and city light blobs, while others have darkness during nighttime? Okay, great question. So let me bring up my let me bring up my 24/7 satellite time lapses here. Okay, so here we have, oh, it's a little laggy. Weird. So here we have a view from GOES East zoomed in on the United States. And it is nighttime, and we see clouds, we see landforms, and we see city lights. The reason you see that is because, okay, this may be a YouTube glitch. Let me show you the full globe. Here we go. All right. The reason you see those things is because these GOES images are what they call geocolor, which is a type of composite image, which means multiple images or multiple data sets combined together. So if you were looking at just visual light, let me see if I can find Himawari 8 back here. No. GOES. Most of my videos are GOES. Okay, so here we have Australia as seen by the Himawari 8 satellite. So during night, it is pitch black. And that's because it's looking at purely visible light, like not just the, so it's looking at purely visible light. Whereas geocolor uses other wavelengths of data, other wavelengths of information to, and then they composite it. They composite the data layers over the top of each other so that during the daytime pass you see what's visible, and then at night what you see are a static image of city lights. So they just use a static data set for that. You see the sort of dark purple landforms, just so that for reference, which is another static data set. And then the dynamic data sets that they use for the night portion of the geocolor images are the white upper level ice clouds and the blue lower level water clouds. And so that's an explanation of what you're seeing at night in this view. And so there is actually a version of the Himawari 8 imagery that uses geocolor. So geocolor was developed by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, together with CIRA, which is the, I forget what the acronym means, but it's a group at Colorado State University. And CIRA provides geocolor images from Himawari 8. So they do additional processing above and beyond what the Japanese Meteorological Agency does. And so in those geocolor Himawari 8 images, we actually see the clouds and stuff at night, which is pretty cool, which we can't see in the normal Himawari 8 images. But I have a personal vested interest in this satellite image stuff, so thanks for the question. All right. Anthony says, what is actually going to happen with the ISS? Yeah. So, Rogozin has said, if we stop providing ISS boosts with Progress, is it going to crash into the ocean? Is it going to fall on, Washington or Europe or whatever? But the fact is that we have more than one way to boost the ISS. So if you don't already know, let me go full screen. That's pretty, but I don't want it to be distracting. So, where was I? ISS boosts. So it's possible to boost ISS with the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft, which they actually just did for the first time. A production burn, like they did a test boost back in a few years ago, like I think it was 3-4 years ago. They did a test boost of just, 100 feet or something like that. But the newly arrived Cygnus spacecraft did a full boost of the space station for the first time. And now in order to do that, they actually reoriented the station, basically steering using the station's attitude thrusters, and then they conducted the boost with the Cygnus to raise the orbit altitude of the ISS, which they have to do every few weeks or months, because the ISS, being the biggest thing we have in orbit, experiences more atmospheric drag than any other object up there. And so its orbit falls by a few kilometers every few months, and so they have to boost it back up. Or else eventually it would deorbit, but it would take a while. There's also Dragon, Cargo Dragon and Crew Dragon, the Dragon 2 spacecraft, which can probably provide a boost to the space station, although I don't think they've done that before, because it has its own thrusters. But again, solutions can be developed. Now, ultimately, the plan for the ISS is for it to continue orbiting until the year 2031, at which point it is currently slated to be deorbited over Point Nemo in the Pacific, which would be an amazingly spectacular display because nothing that big has ever been deorbited before. Mir, the former Russian space station, was just a small portion of what the ISS is. It was much smaller, but it could be extended. I mean, maybe it'll change hands and be picked up by a private entity. I mean, that's basically what NASA's doing, is they are seeding, not SEED, but CEDE, seeding low Earth orbit to private industry, to commercial, entities. NASA doesn't want to be in the business of maintaining this orbital outpost any longer. They want to focus on the moon, Mars, and beyond, as they say. Snow Kittens says, just noticed that the Russian word that I can't pronounce YouTube channel is down. They used to share operations at Baikonur to us in 4K. So, so there's a lot of sanctions being levied against Russia right now. A lot of companies are cutting ties. Microsoft, Samsung, who knows, maybe even YouTube might decide that they're going to pull out of Russia. Who knows? But there's probably going to be some channels and some sites that we no longer have ready access to because of this political situation / war. Mark Desert says the 1940s spruce goose, the crowning achievement, one might say, of Howard Hughes, I believe it was also a very big bird. Yes, it was, but it didn't fly very far. Andrea Truby says, with the seats on Crew Dragon being personalized to each astronaut, how would that work if we had to bring someone back that didn't come up on it? I'm sure that they are adjustable to a degree that would make a return trip safe for Mark Van de Heye if he did have to come back on a Crew Dragon. And so there also may be one of the other passengers that's of a similar size to Mark Van de Heye. So, yeah, I mean, you're not going to find any fat astronauts, and you're not going to find very many really tall astronauts either. So, there's only a window of size that you're going to find spacefarers coming in. And I'm sure they would be able to accommodate Mark if it came down to that. Jake Miller. So I don't always believe stuff on Twitter, but is it true that Elon is sending satellites to Ukraine? Yes, satellite dishes, yes. So SpaceX / Elon did send, as I mentioned earlier in the show, did send basically a truckload of Starlink satellite dishes to Ukraine because a lot of areas of Ukraine have had their services disrupted, their internet, they might have power, but their internet and other services, maybe they could run it off of a generator or something if they don't have power. But he did send a shipment of Starlink dishes to Ukraine. And what they found was that the dishes, the terminals were being jammed for hours at a time by unknown Russian forces, and so that's why Elon mentioned that they're shifting their focus, that SpaceX is shifting their focus temporarily to cybersecurity, or and not counter jamming, but to defeat, to get around the jamming that's happening, because he's trying to provide these internet connections to Ukrainians who would otherwise be offline, which, it may seem like a small thing to have an internet connection, but when it's your only method of communicating with the outside world, it can be absolutely essential, life and death essential. So he's doing a really amazing thing with this, and the timing is fortuitous. If this war had happened a couple of years ago, there wouldn't have been any alternative. There wouldn't have been a Starlink available. Peter Gerde says, "What's the naked eye experience? Are city lights visible to astronauts on the night side?" Why, yes, they are. So the human eye has a greater dynamic range than I think any artificial light sensor. Now, the advantage that cameras have is they can see wavelengths of light outside of what we can see. So, for example, ultraviolet or infrared, and they can drink in the photons for extended periods of time. So your eyes can only see what you can see in real time. But a camera, for example, you can hold a camera open for 30 seconds and collect all sorts of light and produce brilliant images that you can't see with your naked eye, because your eye can't collect photons over a period of time and then form an image from them. But nonetheless, yes, the city lights and the stars and the aurorae and all of that are very visible to the astronauts at night, on the night side of Earth. Now, in the daytime, they're not going to see stars because everything is brightly illuminated by the sun. I mean, space itself isn't illuminated by the sun, but the space station is, and the surface of the Earth is, and the sun is literally in the sky above them. And so their eyes are adjusted for, for bright illumination, and so they don't see stars during the daytime. Now, I would actually love to ask an astronaut, have they tried to see the stars during the daytime, like by limiting their views so that they're not looking at the brightly lit Earth with the blackness of space beyond, so they're just looking at space during the daytime. And because I've never actually seen an answer to that question, and I would love to actually hear from an astronaut themselves if they've ever tried that, or if they know anyone who's ever tried that. But most of us, almost all of us, will never get that chance. So, but yes, they can definitely see city lights and stars on the night side. Also from Peter, I wonder what the actual rate of the kinetic energy loss is measured in watts of that slow orbit decay. That is a calculable value, I'm sure, although I certainly don't know the formulas. It is a calculable value that, calculable with variables, because the rate of orbital decay depends on the amount of atmospheric drag that the vehicle is experiencing. And atmospheric drag is not a constant, because the atmosphere is always changing. Like, for example, the batch of Starlink satellites that were launched on 3 February that were lost in low Earth orbit because there was a geomagnetic storm due to an outburst of energetic particles by the sun, causing the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere to essentially puff out to heat up and puff out, causing additional drag to those satellites, and prompting SpaceX to put the satellites into a safe mode where they were flying edge on into their orbital trajectory without having their solar panels deployed or being able to raise their orbits to their target altitude. The atmosphere is variable, largely dependent on the activity of the sun. And so while you could calculate the rate of decay and the equivalent number of watts or whatever for the ISS, that's going to vary depending on what's happening with the space weather, which can't always be predicted. So, all right. Let's see. Peter says, so far I've come up with about 2 megajoules to boost for 420,000 kilograms by 1 meter. So the rate is orbital altitude decays can be divided by that. All right. Okay, so I think that we have a few questions trickling in, but that's it for now. Uncle Yukon says only items in space are illuminated by the sun due to reflection of the sun off of those items. So, yeah, the self-luminous items that you can see include, city lights, aurora, air glow, which is a different mechanism, but the Earth's atmosphere has a slight glow to it due to the interactions of upper atmospheric molecules, and those things can be seen at night, whereas everything else requires that the sunlight bounces off of them. Mark Desire says average ISS orbital decay is about 1 kilometer or 1 mile every month, I thought. So, kilometer, mile, yeah. In any case, I think that'll wrap it up for this week. Thank you all for joining me. And please be kind to each other. Stay skeptical. Stay safe. And keep it raw. Until next time. Bye for now.